Greetings of peace. My name is Ra M. Hotep. I'm broadcasting on behalf of 13scienceastrology.com. Doing this video on a inquiry that I got, but it was actually funny because somebody asked me to do this video, but I was getting ready to do a video about this even before one of my fellow subscribers asked me to do a video about this. But this video is about the Akashic Records. Some people refer to it as the Akasha Records, and help people to understand exactly what these very mystical records are. Now, it's a lot of people out there that they don't really believe that there is a place that stores everything that ever was, is, and will be. See, it's a lot of people that don't believe that. But whether you believe it or not, there is a such place as that. And that place is the Akashic or Akasha Records. These records are not a physical, they're not in a physical place, meaning that they're not in a third dimensional place. These records have to be accessed on what's called the astral plane. Now, you cannot just access them on any level of the astral plane. There's a certain level of the astral plane that you must go to access the Akashic records, or the records of Akasha. Now, you had a lot of clairvoyants, a lot of psychics, a lot of healers and intuitive people that have accessed the Akashic records. Some of them haven't. Some of them have actually, the Akashic records, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but there's different levels even to the Akashic records, or the records of Akasha. And when you start talking about certain people, like certain psychics and mediums that claim that they have access the Akashic records, I'm not saying they haven't, but many of them have basically just, it's kind of like if you go into a library, right? You go into a library, there's different parts of the library. You got the computers, where most people spend most of their time getting on the computers. Then you have the magazines. Then you have the books. Now, when you start talking about the books, I mean, you have different type of books. So, but most of the time, what happens is the good books in the library. Most of the time, from the libraries that I went to, most of the really good books are usually located on the top floor of like of your good, like these are your good public libraries or whatever. I spent a lot of time in different libraries, and even those of you that go to have went to the Library of Congress or whatever, and have went to, that type of library, you need access to get into certain rooms or whatever. Like, even when you start dealing with the Library of Congress, there's certain information that you can't get unless you have access. Well, that's how it is with the Akashic records. Certain psychics, clairvoyants, and intuitive people, empaths, and those different type of people, empaths, whatever they call themselves. I'm not really good at pronouncing that word, but those particular people, they may have accessed the Akashic records, but they may not have fully researched the whole library, or they may not have even went to the top level, or to the where the real information is kept in the Akashic records. Because when you go to the Akashic records, there are spiritual guardians, or there are spiritual custodians or guardians or masters that protect the Akashic records and protect the library of the Akashic records. Now, I know this isn't a physical place, and people are like, well, you're describing it like it's so physical. It's not a physical place, but that doesn't mean it's not a state. It is a state. It is a place. The way you see the Akashic records is basically depending on your mentality. So some people see it as a computer, where they get on a computer and access whatever they want to access. Some people see it as a library. When in actuality, it's all of that and even then some. It's all of that and even then some. So it is definitely a state in a physical, well, I shouldn't say a physical, but a spiritual place. Now, people are wondering, where exactly is the Akashic records? The Akashic records are in the etheric realm. They're on the etheric level. That's where the Akashic records are at. Akasha is a Hindu term that deals with ether or air. So everything that we will do, did, and might do is recorded in the Akashic records. I know you're thinking, well, don't we have free will? Well, yeah, we do have free will. But most of you guys, as far as humans, are so predictable that what you're going to do is basically already predicted or whatever. Like what your potential has already been mapped out and laid out, what you probably are going to do. Now, if you some kind of way manage to go past that and surpass that, you go into a level of where the history needs to be rewritten. History needs to be rewritten about what will happen with you, because now you've ascended to the next level. So you kind of like broke through a certain barrier. Now, if you really want to understand this concept, those of you that have seen the movie The Adjustment Bureau, it's a really good movie. And actually, I'm going to do a whole video on The Adjustment Bureau because it was such a good movie. But it's one part I want to talk about here in particular. It was a part on that movie where you remember the, I don't want to like make this a spoiler and kind of kill the movie for those that haven't seen it. But you had basically, let's just say they were agents. And you had these agents that were manipulating this certain politician's life. And in a certain part of that movie, if you remember, when he got with the girl, they wanted to keep him away from the girl or whatever because they felt like the girl was going to take him off his course. But you remember, basically, he ended up getting with the girl and going against the Bureau to a certain degree, ended up getting with the girl anyway. And remember, they had to rewrite it. Remember, they had to rewrite history or whatever. They rewrote the book, or they rewrote, to them it was the history, but to him it was his future. They rewrote his future based on him getting with the girl. So that's basically what I mean about the Akashic Records. When you become a god, when you tap into divine power, what was said of you based on you on your human level, once you become a god, and it's a certain way you become a god, I'll do a video on that. But once you become a god, you rewrite the history that was said of you based on you being reincarnated into your immortal state. Just like if you came and you were reincarnated as a god, and then if you decide to fall into becoming immortal, the history will be rewritten about you. The things that you may have accomplished will not, basically you didn't accomplish them, so the history will be rewritten. And the Akashic Records, it's that's what I'm saying. It's not like your typical place that you go to or whatever. You read a book and that's just what's in that book and there's no way you could change it. It's already etched in stone. The Akashic Records is dealing with the synopsis of now, the future, and the past all together. So these things can constantly, the past is always changing, believe it or not, when you do things in the present. Just like the future is always changing once you know it. And I know people are like, well, the past isn't changing. I can't change the fact that my mom died and that's in the past. Your mom's not dead. That's what I'm saying, because it's like your mentality and how we think about things kind of like keeps us trapped into a certain reality. See, we're trapped into a certain reality based on the way we think about things and the way we process our thoughts or whatever. But if we were universal beings and dealt with a universal thinking, we would know that your mom still exists. Her physical shell may be gone, but she didn't die. And I'm not saying that a person's mom, really, I'm just speaking hypothetically. Like a person that's saying that their mom died or whatever. Your mom didn't die. You know what I'm saying? She still exists. And there's a difference between existence and reality. And I know people hear me say this all the time, and I'll do a video on that. But your mom still exists. She may not be in your reality right now, which is different. So yeah, she may not be real to you anymore because you don't see her, but she still exists. And most people, they want to limit themselves to reality. They don't want to deal with existence. So these are your people. I'm a realist. Yeah, you can be a realist, but I exist. I'm a part of existence. It's more than just being real. Yeah, I like to be real and I keep it all the way real while I'm here in the third dimension. But at the end of the day, I exist. It always will exist. So, and that's why people can't understand the concept of the immortals and all of that, because they don't understand the concept of existence versus reality. And there's a way that you can tap into existence while still in the physical shell. And this is one of the things that will help you to become immortal. And I know we're dealing with the Akashic Records, but it all goes hand in hand, because the Akashic Records has all of that stuff. It has all of that stuff on file. It has the immortals on file. It has all of that stuff on file. It's right in the Akashic Records or whatever. So basically, like I said, it's the etheric records. Now you can tap into different levels of it. Some people, when they tap into it, they see certain things and they're not allowed to see certain things because they don't have access codes that go that high. So it's just like if you go to the Library of Congress, you might not be able to go into certain parts of the Library of Congress unless your access is high enough. It's the same way with the Akashic Records. And you want to know, and the reason why I know that many people have not even been high up into the Akashic Records, and I'm going to explain to you why, is because they don't know the language of those particular custodians and beings that guard the Akashic Records. So they're only able to go so far. It's just like if you were initiated into a secret society, if you don't know the handshake or if you don't know the secret passcode, you're not going to be able to go so high. Well, that's how the Akashic Records is. Most people don't know the language that these particular beings spoke, so they're only able to go so far. Yeah, you can only go so far speaking English. See, if you don't know any of the ancient languages, if you're not familiar with Sanskrit, if you're not familiar with the Metu Neter, or what we call the Egyptian language, if you're not familiar with the Sumerian language, or what they call Ugaric or whatever, and these different tongues or whatever, if you're not familiar with these different languages that are what they call the ancient languages, you're not getting into the Akashic Records, because the particular beings that brought us our language already speak this particular language. So when we started speaking the original language that we were speaking on this planet before it got broken into dialects, and I did a video on this about language, but before our language got broken into dialects, there was an original language on this planet or whatever. And basically what happened was different beings came in and pretty much mixed in their information and their languages and their dialects into the original dialect that was given to us by the Anunnaki. These beings came in and kind of like basically watered down that language. And this is why, like, when you start researching language as far as the history of language, see, people don't realize this. The language has a history to it. And when you go into the history of language, you always see that it always takes you into another language. You know what I'm saying? It always takes you to another language. Now, many of us can't go back past Arabic because we don't even know how to speak Arabic. But when you start researching Arabic, you'll find out that even the Arabic goes back into some of the classical languages like the Metu Neter, which is the Egyptian language. Most of your Arabic comes from out of the Metu Neter, which was the language that the Kamites or the Egyptians spoke. So you can't get into the Akashic Records unless you're able to speak that language. You can't get into the part that I'm talking about to really get the meat of the Akashic Records. And this is why people tap into it, like your prophets and messengers and people that you call prophets and messengers. They tapped into the Akashic Records and they weren't able to see everything because they couldn't speak the language. That's why they weren't able to see everything. It's just like if you can't read a certain book, you can't read a certain book because you can't speak the language that book was written in. So the Akashic Records very much operates off of language. Very much operates off of language. So it's only so far that a lot of people have gotten, and a lot of people have gotten some good information from the Akashic Records. Now, another thing I want to point out, as far as when you start talking about tapping into the future, it works like this. This is how it works when you, and I'm going to do a video to help people understand oracles, but I want to point this out here. When you start talking about tapping into the future changes based on you knowing about it. You've just changed your future. So say, for instance, you go to a psychic and they tell you this is going to happen. That doesn't mean you're going to change your future, but you now, since they told you that this is going to happen to you, you now have been empowered with the ability to write your own future. And that's deep. So what happens is when you tap into the Akashic Records about future events, because people are wondering how can, if it's a set record, that means it's recorded and it should be set in stone. But the future doesn't work like that. See, when you tap into, and even the past even doesn't even work like that. So when you tap into something in relationship to the future, you automatically change the Akashic Records. And to really understand this, I stress that you guys go and watch that movie called The Adjustment Bureau if you haven't already, because he changed his future, and this will help you to understand what was going on or whatever. He changed his future. And this was really all about the Akashic Records, amongst other things. It's about some other things too that I won't point out here, but it has a lot to do with the Akashic Records or whatever that movie does or whatever. And he changed his future. So you can do this once you learn how to tap into the realm of ether or the realm of Akasha. And it's deep or whatever. I mean, now the Akashic Records was popularized by the Theosophical Society, but it was in existence before then. Actually, it was actually part of the school of Tahuti, and they got something called the Hall of Records, and that's a part of the school of Tahuti. And when you became an initiate and became a Jedi in the school of Tahuti, you were taught how to access the Akashic Records. But in order to even be initiated into an order like that, you couldn't do it unless you were able to speak the language. You had to speak the language. Like, they weren't let people get through that mystery system unless they were able to decode and speak the language. So that's why a lot of us here in this modern world haven't got so high into accessing the Akashic Records, because we can't even decode the language. Language is key when you deal with the Akashic Records, very key. And a lot of people, a lot of Western authors aren't going to tell you this, but I mean, they just probably don't know. You know what I'm saying? They probably don't know that it was deeper and you can go higher. You basically tap into the Akashic Records through astral traveling, and I'll do a video on what astral traveling is eventually. You can tap into it through astral traveling, or you can have someone tap into the Akashic Records for you that already has been granted a certain level of access to get so far into the Akashic Records. Now, anytime you deal with Akashic readers, what you need to ask them is that how far does their access go? Are they able to understand different languages, basically? If they're only able to understand English, then you know that they can only go so far. Now, I'm not saying don't deal with them, because you can get a lot of information from the Akashic Records from English. But if you don't understand other languages, it's only so far you're going to be able to go into the Akashic Records as far as decoding the information that is even given to you once you finally make it in there. Then you even have to know how to get in there. So there's certain ways that if you haven't been initiated, you're not even going to be able to get into the Akashic Records, because they have guardians guarding it, because it's different extraterrestrial beings that would abuse the Akashic Records if it wasn't for certain guardians that guard it. So, ETs know all about the Akashic Records. They know all about the Akashic Records, and that's not the only form of recording that is located in the universe. There's other records too. You have the Akashic Records are the pristine records that you have to be pure to tap into, but you have another recording, and I won't give the name out here, but this is for the disagreeable beings. They have their own library, and like I said, I won't give that name out here, but so it's different levels to the Akashic Records or whatever. It's different records in the universe. Akasha is for the pure at heart, so you can't access it unless you're pure. Can't access the Akashic Records unless you're pure, and that's one safeguard. Then once you become pure, then you still have to go through certain other initiations and tests in order to even get access into it. And once you finally get access into it, then you got to go through more initiations and more tests to go to the realm of ether, or to go to the dark matter level of it. I'll go ahead and say this, and I'll close this video out. Kind of imagine it as dimensions. Like, you have a version of Akashic Records on the 4th and 5th dimensions, but you might not get as much information. But then if you learn how to access the Akashic Records on the 6th, 7th, and 8th dimensions, you can start getting more information. So the Akashic Records exists on different levels and different dimensions. Like, it doesn't just exist on one dimension. So that's a way to help you to understand. So most people haven't built up an alliance with the etheric level of the astral plane, so they don't know how to, since they haven't built up an alliance with it, they don't know how to access the etheric records, the etheric aspect of the Akashic Records. You have the astral aspect, or the light aspect. You have the etheric aspect. There's different aspects of it. You know what I'm saying? There's different aspects of it. So that's basically my brief dissertation on the Akashic Records. For more enlightening information, visit my website, 13signsastrology.com. And until we meet again, I'll leave you in peace.